What is up, track nerds? New song alert? What was that? I'm Chris Chavez. Coming to no, don't worry about Chris. He very ambiguously told us he was unavailable to do a reaction to the Silesia Diamond League, but we're coming to you live on Sunday afternoon. Just watched 2 hours of a wonderful track meet. I'm Kyle Merber, joined by Mac Fleet and David Melly, and we're drinking Olipop right out the gate. Drank 3 of these over the course of 2 hours of what was an exciting meet in Poland. The second Diamond League meet ever in Poland. 23,000 fans were on hand. Pretty good showing. Beautiful stadium, warm weather, and we've got a list of topics that we want to run down, recap, live reaction. We haven't even had a chance to process everything yet. And since we just finished that 100-meter matchup, they both showed up, Sha'Carri Richardson and Shericka Jackson. David, are you still shaking?
It was awesome. I think after the national champs last weekend, everyone was assuming, we're going to wait till Budapest to see these two race each other head to head. And kudos to the meet organizers in Silesia, because they were like, no, we're going 6 days later. They're going to throw down. And it was an incredible race. It was, we're used to seeing Sha'Carri when she's really on, get out the blocks and get out to a great fast first 30, 40 meters, but she was actually closing late in this one. And she pipped Shericka at the line in the last maybe 5-10 meters. They both ran under 10.8. They're both sharp and fit right now. It's just exactly what you want to see as a fan of the sport. They're racing frequently. They're in great fitness. No one's running well at the expense of somebody else. They're both running great. And especially we'll talk about the men's 100 later. There's only one top 100-meter runner right now that is undefeated in 2023, and it is Sha'Carri Richardson. So that is going to be very exciting headed into the rest of the season, because I know the Jamaican track fans want their hometown heroes to defend. So it's going to be a really fun time in Budapest. And then, of course, the big shout out we have to give to the hometown heroes in Poland. Ewo Sobota broke 11 seconds for the first time in third, and she broke it by a big margin, 10:94. She was crying, hugging her friends. It was awesome to see. And then especially after maybe like a little bit of a disappointing USA's for TT Terry, getting under 11 seconds for the first time this season, definitely she's my pick for the 4x1, like put her in the relay for sure. And she's looked really strong this season and is definitely trending in the right direction.
I think that following what was obviously a very successful U.S. champs for Sha'Carri, to come out following that emotion and immediately show that, that the fitness is real. It's one thing to beat the other Americans. It's another when you're beating the Jamaicans. And I definitely appreciated that Sha'Carri and Shericka did acknowledge each other after the race, a little small hug. It wasn't a full embrace or anything, but they acknowledge each other, and it was definitely game, respect, game. And I think at this point they both know, like, this is just the preview. Sha'Carri is excited and happy, but she's not showboating at the end of Worlds. That's what's the unfinished business that we have to go to. I would say her start was not great, which, and we're going to get into this a little bit in a moment, but you're coming right off a plane after racing 6 times with the 200 just last week. So to follow that up, run 10:76, kudos to her showing up. We did initially have Talu on the start list for this, who is definitely someone that we don't want to sleep on when talking about who potential medal contenders are. So we'll have to wait to see where she fits into the bigger picture.
Yeah, her only defeat of the season is her very first race. She got second at Mount Sac, and then she's been undefeated since then. So not quite an undefeated 2023, but definitely a really strong middle of the season for her. Definitely, it's always hard to kind of read too much into what you see on TV without like really talking to the athletes and getting an in-depth sense of their mentality. But from my outsider perspective, Sha'Carri looked like the lightest and the happiest that she has all season. I feel like headed into USA's the first part of the season, like there definitely really seemed as if there was a chip on her shoulder. She still had something to prove, and now that she kind of got through the US champs, like she just seemed like she was having fun out there, and I think that's what you want to see, as a fan of just American sprinting generally, is the stars feeling good, being on cloud nine, not feeling the pressure, because I think that's where you get some of your fastest performances too.
Onto the 400. We were just talking about the Polish hometown advantage in Swidowa, and then we definitely saw that in the 400. I think everyone would have been expecting the Marlady Polino show to continue here, and instead it was Kaczmarek, the hometown favorite, Natalia Kaczmarek, running 49:48. First time under 50 seconds this season. Big personal best, meet record, which I guess, we saw a lot of meet records for good reason. And I think just the way that Polino ran the race, she didn't get out in the way that we, only expect someone who's capable of running 48 seconds. And she had a great last 100, but it just ultimately wasn't enough. And so the defending champion from last year's Worlds gets taken down by an athlete who did not make the World Championship final.
The defending silver medalist. We're gonna have Shawnee Miller-Weibo fans in the comments chirping you. No, I mean, I think Bobby Kersey and Sydney McLaughlin-Levrone got to be feeling real good right now, because Polino looked like she was working hard. She didn't look like she really phoned that one in, and third and 50 flat. That's not gonna inject any fear into somebody who just ran 48.7. So. I'm sure I will get some Dominican track fans in my mentions, as they were earlier this season. But I have to think that after this, Sydney has to be considered the heavy favorite headed into Budapest.
And then definitely also a shout out to Leaky Klaver for a personal best herself. She runs so brave, never scared to take it out super hot that first 200 meters.
I just want to say to the Team USA relays coach, can we please not phone in the mixed 4x4 this year? Because the Dutch team is going to absolutely spank us if we don't put, a top effort into that one. And it seems like every year we just assume that we're going to walk away with the mixed 4x4, and then teams like, the Dutch team and the Polish team that have these, they don't necessarily have 4 strong legs, but they have 2 strong male legs and 2 strong female legs. They're gonna hand our ass to us if we don't actually take the mixed race seriously.
All right, men's 100, Mac. What are you feeling after this one? This was a tight finish. We had lots of photos to be looking at.
Yeah, it was a super close finish, and I would have to guess that Fred got injured at some point over the last month, because he just doesn't look 100%. He doesn't look right, but I think he's past that injury because he's racing. I think if he was currently still hurt, I don't think he would have been lined up at this meet. He just doesn't look that smooth, but I think there's enough time between now and World Champs that he's going to be okay. He just doesn't have, he's not putting it all together right now. I don't know. David, what did it look like to you?
Yeah, I mean, whether it's a health issue or just all his training is really heavily tilted towards, being in top shape in August, and he's really just still has a pretty heavy workload right now. That wouldn't surprise me either. But it's clear, both last weekend and this weekend, he's not running badly, but he's not walking away from the field like he has in the past. And I think it's entirely possible that we'll all look like idiots in August when he is running 9.6 and everything he's doing right now in training is paying off on the track. But as of right now, I'm not saying it's time to worry about Fred, but there have been more questions around him in the last 2 weeks than there have been in the last year leading up to this.
I think that what we saw at USA's, we know that he has an ongoing ankle issue. It's part of the reason why he moved from the 400 down to the 100, and he looked super uncomfortable on the turn at USA's. But I would say, looked probably like he had his top end speed at the end of that 200, or at least like close to what it would normally be. Today, I'm not like overly concerned, but I do want to just give credit to Simbine. Like this is a huge win for him. Like when you take a look at this field and some of these names that he's beating. So, a guy who historically being, South African champs is months ago, and he always runs so fast, super early on in the spring. And it's looking like things are timing out a little bit better this year to be coming out beating this field when he did. But Crevant Charleston, the U.S. champ, looked like he had this thing wrapped up to about 90 meters. My boy, he just didn't have that last 10. And Simbine, the way that he won was that lean. Like he just timed it so perfectly. Ultimately, like Fred, if they would have switched leans, then this would have been Fred's race. But Crevant, really, really strong start that definitely stood out in the middle of the race, equally as strong. Just that last 10 meters was right there, but not quite enough.
Which
which
leads us to, why are U.S. athletes here if you don't need to be here? A lot of people look tired, and this isn't just like sprinters. This is our jumpers, distance runners, everybody. If you didn't have to be here, and you're already qualified to Worlds, why are you here? Why are you racing? Because we just had a huge, U.S. championship just a few days ago.
Money. Probably the best reason, perhaps. But, it's tough. Like, it's such an emotional roller coaster being at the U.S. championships and qualifying, getting through that and everything. And then if you didn't qualify, you want to get right back out there and get revenge, which we end up seeing with Sage in the 800. But, I do ultimately think that you see it is possible, but it's not even necessarily always a physical thing. It's like a mental and emotional thing. We just saw some of the athletes like Sean McGorty go out and pop a 13:02 in order to knock out his world standard in Houston this weekend. We saw Joe Wascom go to Lignano and run 3:34, basically secure his spot via ranking. So it is possible to physically bounce back quick enough within a week. And, the flight to Europe, it can be done, but emotionally you have to be in the right mindset. And what that ultimately does is it does leave some athletes a little flat. And that's, it's maybe it was too much fun in Eugene.
And for the sprinters, especially, if you're potentially going to be on the relay pool, it is in some ways a good simulation for the kind of same schedule that Worlds is going to look like. It's a 10-day competition. And if you're running on day 2 and day 9, that's pretty similar to USA's into Poland. So, on some sense, maybe some of these folks are thinking just, I know I'm not going to be at the top of my game, but I need to prep my body to, kind of feel what an extended sort of stress and recovery cycle of multiple races in a short period of time feels like. But yeah, it's definitely a tough one. And especially if, you're somebody who doesn't travel well. I personally do not travel well at all. I'm glad that I was not on a flight to Poland this week, but especially, just with the time change and everything, it's a tough turnaround for sure.
All right. So David, this next topic I think is for you specifically to go on a little rant perhaps, but we had this flat 3K in there and it was a good race. We had for Lenny Halu run 8:26, the two Ethiopians battling against Jurek after, the Kenyan led a huge majority of the race. But why are we doing a flat 3K at this point in the season? What's its purpose?
Yeah, I mean, I will start by saying, in college especially, 3K was my distance. Like, I was a little too slow for the mile and a little too weak for the 10K, and the 3K especially was, a fun race to run. But like, keep that shit indoors. Like, there's no qualifying to be had. It's hard to wrap your mind around what's fast in the 3K, and it just, it's this weird, I don't know, vendetta that the Diamond Leagues have had against the distance events, where they were threatening to cut the 5K a couple of years back. And, this seems like this weird kind of like compromise effort of, well, we don't want to make people sit through a 14-minute race. Well, I'm like, well, I just watched, a 4.5-hour Tour de France stage yesterday and I had a great time. So I think we need to own the sport that we have and stop these, half measures to keep people engaged, because I think it's worse to have an event that no one understands and no one can compare week to week with what somebody did in the 5K at their national championships last weekend. It's much harder to follow if we're going to keep running these random off distances this deep into the outdoor season.
Well, what ends up happening is essentially you just don't get as deep of fields because no one necessarily wants to go and run a 3K. So it's like, would you rather have an extra 5 minutes of racing to see the absolute loaded 5K fields, or, a slightly less deep 3K field? It just feels like the 3K took some momentum out of the meet. And it was a good race. It just doesn't matter that much, right?
Well, speaking of momentum, one of the
go for it.
One of the exciting races to see, all of the big stars, the heavy hitters, as our friends at the coffee club say, going head to head, is the women's 100 hurdles. We missed Jasmine Camacho Quinn. She was entered in this meet, but pulled out. But we got pretty much everybody else. And one of the things, talk about easing into the season at the right time. World record holder, world champ Tobi Amasan has not looked great until the last couple weekends, and it's clear that she, maybe deliberately, maybe there was a little issue in training early in the season, but she's rounding into shape at just the right time for the postseason. And you want to talk a good lean. She beat Kenny on the last meter of that race by just absolutely nailing the lean. They should teach that in if you're at track camp this summer, show that video to your kids in your clinics.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting how quickly things change after USA's, or just like the difference. If you run USA's 10 times, how many different hurdlers might win the race? So, Kenny Harrison beating the US champ, but also just like the depth of the 100 hurdles. I don't fully understand what has happened the last few years. It's just everyone has completely elevated their game, where now 12-4 is getting fourth place in like random Diamond League races all of a sudden. It's just like, these are medaling times. Not that long ago, I don't know, is it shoes? Like, does shoes help the 100 hurdles as much as maybe it does in the 5K? It's just it's really cool to see that everyone is just completely elevated as much as they have. I blame the depth of the US and I blame the NCAA.
I will say just my little input for the American hurdlers here. Like, Kenny Harrison is back to form. Like, she hasn't looked this good, I think, in quite a few years. And, I don't want to say that she's a lock for a podium, but just because, like you were saying, Kyle, the event is so deep, globally. But she had a tough year. I think it was 2 years ago. And I remember at Melrose, she crashed out of like one of the 60 hurdle races, and she was so pissed. And then she changes coaches, moves out to LA. And I think it's had like a really intentional season. I always talk about, like, I love seeing athletes have really intentional seasons on building from point A to B to C. And I think that she is one of those athletes right now, and is back to form and is going to have an awesome showing in Budapest.
Yeah, she's definitely somebody who's had a a little bit of postseason issues in the past. So, after the silver at the Olympics, tough time in 2022. It'll be great to see her kind of figure out the formula to like always be performing at the right time for sure.
Did it feel like, and this is not a knock, this is a positive thing that I'm saying, but did it feel like we saw even more field event than we normally do in a lot of 2-hour windows? So first off, Rojas is such a performer, and I feel like we don't always get to see it as much as we got to see today. They really focused on her like clap, the amount that she talks to herself is pacing around. We end up getting that world lead on the sixth and final jump, is I believe it was 15:18. But also that high jump, David, I know you're our field guy. Like, you must have been ecstatic about how much field event we were able to watch.
Yeah, I mean, it's always frustrating when people talk about like how it being impossible to produce a great track TV broadcast, because I think for the most part the Diamond Leagues have it figured out. They have the right balance in the schedule of creating these pockets to follow these narratives and not just replaying an attempt that happened 20 minutes ago when there's a bumper to a commercial. But I think the most exciting thing in this race, I said in the preview, Barshim hadn't competed since May. He didn't have a super strong season's best. He's known, he's had issues in the past with health, but he's also the 3-time world champ, and he always seems to put it together at the right time. And I said, if he's not able to win a competition like this in a legitimate height, over 2.3 meters, he's going to be in trouble. And he showed us he got the job done. He pulled it out. 236 is the world lead by, I think, a pretty good margin. I think the world lead was something like 233 going into this weekend, and guys like Tim Berry pushing him to come out on top, I think is gonna hopefully make this another exciting, maybe nothing will top Tokyo with the co-gold medalists, but their rivalry and friendship is just so fun to watch, especially when they're both jumping well in kind of like a famously, up and down event, no pun intended.
I think as a distance runner, I don't always fully appreciate the peaking that goes into the field events. Like how drastic of a difference you can be in a matter of a couple weeks, just because it just seemed this is not the way it is, but this is, I think, how my previous understanding would be, is like, well, if you can jump, you can always jump. And it's just like, no matter how perfect your form is or whatnot, when you start to deload a little bit, like, you get springs in your legs. So really cool to see Barshim and Tambiri, the shared gold medalists out there dueling it in Poland. The crowd definitely appreciated it. Something that we really appreciated, Wade Van Niekerk. My God, can that guy close out 400? His fastest time since 2017. Correct me on the exact time. Was it 44.08? And so, now second fastest time in the world this year. Just love the trajectory right now. It just seems like he's got his swagger back. At this point, like, would you be willing to bet against him?
I think the big question is there anyone else to bet on? With all due respect to some of the Americans, putting it together at this point in the season, it hasn't been a banner year for the men's 400. It really hasn't. We haven't seen a bunch of sub 44s. We haven't seen, anybody sort of really running through the Diamond League circuit. So I wouldn't bet against him, because I don't really see anybody stepping up to challenge him. And maybe that changes in the next month or so. But right now, we're probably on track to see, one of the slower years in the men's 400. But that could be exactly what Van Niekerk needs to kind of, get his mojo back headed into Paris for sure.
Yeah, the one guy who has run faster, DNF this race, Zambia Muzala Semakunga, he ran that 43.9 at all the way back in Botswana, which feels like forever ago, but only 20 years old, super young. I don't know exactly what happened today. Hopefully healthy and fine, because he's definitely the guy that, could be the one to potentially really push Wade to do something special this season. But, going down the line a little bit, Mac, we welcome back a blonde Alison Dos Santos. What do you think of that 44.73?
I think that's his season opener. We haven't seen him over hurdles quite yet. I'm pretty sure. So it's good to see him healthy. Maybe we see another flat 400 before he starts getting over hurdles. But again, he's got 4 weeks and he's so talented over hurdles that he's obviously going to have a shot no matter what. And then my other point looking at this is, was this race worth it for the American men to come out to? Because, I mean, the paycheck had to have been pretty nice here, but these guys are tired and definitely aren't super excited right now in the hotel, being like, Vernon Norwood has been doing really well in these Diamond League 400s all year. And now he just finished 7th, which is probably his worst finish all year long in any race that he's done. And then now you've got to sort of correct that and change, your mindset momentum going into Worlds. So for these guys, it's like, I don't know about this trip.
Has Ryan Willie gone pro? He might not even be getting a paycheck to head to Poland. I think he was still in a Florida uniform. So, then you really got to ask yourself, like, that's a tough, long season to put yourself through. So, it definitely, I'm sure there's a reason for it, but I don't envy it. That's for sure.
It's hard to say no. All right. So jumping to maybe I don't know if 2 races is enough to call someone like a tactical genius. Maybe Mary Moore just, hit it right the last 2 times we've seen her race. But now, like, what are we witnessing? Like, does she have a better shot to maybe beat a Thing Mo than Keely Hodgkinson just because of how well she can put together 800 meters from the front? Her ability to slow down the race and surge and just cause chaos behind her and really throw everyone off their rhythm is quite incredible. So she ran 156.85, a season's best for her, but just the control is really what does it for me. Like, it almost appears that she's dying on that back straightaway on the final lap and then somehow like resurges and from the field. So I don't know, Mac, like is this enough of a sample size to say that she has figured out the tactics of the 800?
I think so. I'm obsessed with how she races, and like any sort of criticism that she goes out behind the rabbit and slows down. Guess what? It's a race. Like, it's a race to the finish line, and it does not matter how you get there. If you want to go behind the rabbit, guess what? Get out faster than Mary, and then get behind the rabbit. She tends to have like 2 to 3 yo-yos, like you were saying, and it gets all the runners behind her just uncomfortable enough to chop and either clip each other or get uncomfortable enough to like try to make a move on her. So you saw, someone trying to go on the inside, someone trying to go to the outside, and she navigates lane 1. It's like she's taken up 2 lanes, but she's not really swerving. It's really like nuanced racing, and then just gets people uncomfortable enough that they don't have that kick over the last 100 meters. And she's like, oh yeah, well, I'm also up front and have only run 800 meters. So yeah, I'm going to crush everyone. And she's doing this in running 156. So yeah, I think she's an absolute threat to, a Thing Mo. I don't know if, I think Keely and a Thing Mo run similar races. And Mary definitely runs the most different from them. I don't know how that plays out once we get to the final, but it would be really interesting to see Mary take the lead and control the race at Budapest, or in Budapest rather.
Well, and especially, one of the ways Mo and Mora are similar is they both love that like outside of lane 1 spot that, almost let somebody sneak through on the inside, but not quite spot. And so I think, it's going to be an interesting tactical challenge for Mo if Mora gets that spot on the first lap and she either has to go way wide or really start riding the train. I think of some of the some of the sort of late stage Rhodesia races where he would not run from the front. And, I think it was the 2016 Olympics where he was in DFL for the first like 400. It would be interesting to see Mo essentially say, that's how I'm going to stay out of trouble until the last lap, because more is in my leading spot. But it's also entirely possible that that's exactly what she needs to get out even more hard and start chasing those 153, 154 times. So it puts her in an interesting predicament.
Yeah, Mary versus Keely. Mary, has run 50.3 for 400 meters. Keely at the U23 champs just ran a personal best. I think it was 51.7. And so we haven't seen Keely run a 1500 to my knowledge, but my assumption is that she is quite strong. And I think we've seen Keely lead a lot of races, but if I'm her, I would kind of just let Mary and a thing battle it out that first, certainly the first 200 meters, but really the first lap, and try to take it out. Like, they're going to be fighting for the lead potentially. And if I'm Keely, a little bit more comfortable sitting in the pack than the other two, I would just try to run the smoothest race possible, not respond to every single surge, and try to blast the last 100. But after watching a thing run the 1500 the way that she did at USA's, I'm just like, no, if you can do whatever you want at this point, but she might just be too good. She might just run 153, and then that's the end of the story.
Hodgkinson's 1500 PR is 430 from 2017 when I think she was like 15 or 16 years old. So sounds like, Keely, you got some homework. You gotta test yourself in the 15 and put Kyle's theory to the test.
That's not going to get it done, Keely. You got to get down to 403. But I'm sure she's capable of something similar, in the 40 range. But all right, 1500, Jakob.
Jacob.
Sorry, I've committed to saying Jacob in my head, but I haven't fully converted, but Jacob, as his father and his family all call him, Jacob, and Karsten Varholm also refers to him as Jacob. Talk about a rabbit situation. You somehow get Stewie McSwain to sacrifice himself running in a Diamond League race. That would be a fantastic opportunity. Matt giving us the money sign because it's quite clearly must have been a nice payday. I don't know what, but I'm assuming that there was a few zeros on the back end there, and basically just hauls ass through 1200 meters in 246. I will say, especially having 3 rabbits, like that is a significant amount of rabbits, but all the other athletes just kind of let him take it. Like, Jacob, like, we know what you're going to do. If you slide in on the inside, he didn't have to go around anyone at any point. Had a really smooth race, but ultimately ends up setting a new personal best, 327.14. An area record, of course, obviously a world lead. We're starting to get a little bit closer to that 326.00, but we're not quite there yet. They say that the last 1.14 seconds is the hardest. So some work to be done, but if it is going to be done, it will definitely be with the help of someone like Stewie McSwain. Maybe we can get 1300 meters out of him next time. But yeah, any takeaways or impressions here, Mac, our 1500 guru?
I love watching Jacob race. It's like putting himself out there is always just really fun to watch. And also, respect to the field. I'm sure they were given strict instructions on that first 100 meters. Like, everyone let the rabbits go, and I love that Jacob had hip number 1 because it was a potential record attempt. And a lot of times these tracks aren't perfectly measured. The 1500 line isn't perfectly measured on the waterfall, so they have to put the record attempt athlete in hip 1 in lane 1 because that's an accurate measurement. And so they did that perfectly. I love that stuff. But no, Stewie did an awesome job. It's really hard for these athletes, like when they're running so fast, to kind of judge effort. And you saw there was like a little bit of gap between Stewie and Jacob. And it's so hard to look back over your shoulder when you're running close to all out and being like, oh crap, I have to ease up just a little bit here so he can reconnect. But he totally did that. And I think something kind of bizarre to take away from this also, another bizarre thing to take away from this is Stewie's rounding into fitness. Stewie looked bad earlier this year, and he was struggled with long COVID last year. And it's really awesome to see him progress week after week. And he's finding himself back into some good 15 shape, I think, and 5K shape. But yeah, Jacob, I think as we were texting as the race was happening, after last year, after losing to Jake Whiteman, has worked on his last 100. And it's noticeable even when he's running 327. It's not like he's worked on his last 100 running 331, 332. He has the strongest last 100 out of everyone, even while running this fast. It's massively impressive, and I just hope that, and I trust them. They know more than me. I hope that these sort of record attempts don't disrupt his fitness or racing when it comes to Budapest.
So I got a theory about this rabbit situation, and it seemed to me like there was the deliberate choice to let the gap form. I'm sorry, I want to make sure I get this right. Jacob was giving them a little bit of a gap because what we see, so often in the early laps of these middle distance races is people will burn so much energy to stay on the heels of the pacer rather than letting it like come a little more naturally. And if anybody is comfortable, quote unquote leading, I mean, he's not really leading, but being in a race with a little bit of space in front of you, it's Jacob. And I think he told himself, I want them running the pace that I want to be running at 1,200 meters, and I'm going to give myself 1,200 meters to get there. So I'm not doing any of these, artificial accelerations and, kind of burning as little, additional energy as possible, which is really smart. And I do think, I was joking in the group chat before we went live, I was like, Stewie got to stay in, but like, I think what the difference maker is going to be is having somebody either hot on his heels or even in front of him, in that last lap, because it's clear he can run 327 on his own, but that extra little, percentage to get on that world record holder, he needs somebody close enough to him to keep the fire going once the pain starts to set in.
Yeah. And on the topic of everyone kind of letting him go, they were all rewarded for it. There were 10 guys who ran personal best in this field. Kip Sang ran 329.1. Reynold Chariot, who's had a fantastic year, just keeps getting better and better. 330.30 in third. Andrew Coskren ran 330 for a new Irish 1,500 meter record. I believe he's breaking his own. Sam Tanner, 331.2. You go down the list, like everyone ran so fast. So of course you want to ride that Jacob train. But, on the topic of whether or not, that little gap that formed early from the rabbits, I don't know if you could catch it on TV. Like, I don't know if they cut away, but he actually took a little bit of blood at 300 meters and he saw that his lactate levels were just a little too high at 54 seconds. So he wanted to run 55 low.
You had me on that one. Speaking of Coskren, though, people we shouldn't sleep on. He reminds me a bit of Jake Whiteman last year, as this guy who's, been around, been good for a while, but is clearly having, a career year. And in the event that, maybe the race is a little tactical, or, I mean, I can't see Jacob letting that happen again, but he's totally, I think, kind of one of those dark horse medal threats in a race where he kind of gets in the right position in the right time, because he's just really quietly like rounded into a new level of fitness in the last 6 months or so.
I just got to say, I am I am so excited to get to Budapest where there's no rabbits. As much as I love this stuff, I hate that the Diamond Leagues have rabbits. I hate it. It should just be racing. Races are so much more interesting when there are no rabbits. Get rid of the wave lights. Make Monaco and one other Diamond League some record-setting meets, where you have 100 rabbits and you have 15 different versions of the wave light, but like everything else should, I'm sound like an old man yelling at the clouds. It should just be racing. And I think I'm really excited to watch like this field race again in Budapest with no rabbits, and they've got to figure it out themselves. There's no pecking order there.
So that is coming from resident championship racer, notoriously bad time trialist, Fleet. So no bias in that opinion. But let me just say, it's nice to have some Americans back in the Diamond League after Stockholm. The Twitter feed was more active this time around, getting the American fans re-engaged, all 12 of us. Next up, we do have Monaco in 5 days' time. This is a quick turnaround. So July 21st, Monaco.
Did we rent the CITIUS yacht, or do I still need to get that reservation in?
Yeah, I don't know if a 4-foot little dinghy counts as a yacht, but maybe reserve it.
We can cram a lot of people on there.
So, super fun meet, great way to end the Sunday. There's a lot of discussion previously of like, what's the best time and date that you can possibly imagine for watching Diamond Leagues? Like, I do always kind of enjoy the midweek, late afternoon, just throw it on while working at my desk. But the Sunday morning post long run also hit.
A little early. I think some of them, one of them a couple weeks ago started at noon. I'm not a morning person, and doing my long run at 8 a.m. this morning, even with the heat, I was like a little grumpy about that. But, I love a Sunday afternoon, like a 12 or a 1 p.m. That's a great time to throw on TV and watch a meet. But, I think the real downside of the 10 a.m. start is, I guess you could have mimosas or something, but like I love cracking a beer during a track meet, and it did feel a little early today. Sorry, cracking an Olipop cocktail.
An Olipop with a little gin, a little squeeze of fresh lime, maybe some mint. I don't know. All right. Well, thanks everyone for stopping by, joining us as we recapped and reacted on air to the Silesia Diamond League. We're building up towards Worlds. We're excited. The athletes are maybe a little tired from Team USA. Some are ripping and roaring, but Jacob had no problem bouncing back after USA's. That was quite clear. All right.